if any of us were forced to name what the three most important things in the world are, I think we would all agree the first thing is video games, and the second and third thing are boobies. They make the world go round, no pun intended. So we here at Digital Foundry have decided that in order to properly honor the boobies for Breast Cancer Awareness Month, we'd make this long, overly detailed video about their history in video games. And again, this is 100% for Breast Cancer Awareness Month. Not because my wife caught me staring at a bunch and I had to come up with an excuse on the spot. Our journey begins with the illustrious Fatal Fury 2, which, according to this Wikipedia page I'm reading right at this second, was released in 1992 for arcades and featured the first example of video game boob jiggles in history. Or so Wikipedia claims. I mean, I played this a bunch, but even with two booby jigglers on screen at the same time, I don't quite see what all the fuss is about. But still, history is history, and to avoid the wrath of all the my simps in the comments, we made sure to include it anyway. However, the true potential of what man could do to boobies in video games was not fully grasped or groped until the dawn of the fifth generation of video games. The PlayStation and Sega Saturn saw the release of one of the most important booby games of all time, Dead or Alive. Dead or Alive was clearly a boob physics simulator masquerading as a fighting game, and audiences were here for it. In 1996, it was hard to find anyone on the street that didn't want to get into some titty talk with you. All anyone seemed to care about at the time was the majesty of Kasumi-san's nuanced nips that would bounce everywhere on stage, as if they were being summoned simultaneously to both the heavens and the earth. However, due to the limitation of the Gen 5 machines, the majestic mammaries were not quite ready to assist me in the development of my hidden-under-the-bed crusty sock collection just yet. While the physics were clearly on point, some convincing texture work still needed to be done. My wet dreams were made reality, thanks of course to the Dreamcast, which saw the high-profile releases of both Dead or Alive 2 and Soul Calibur, a series that would be the only franchise on the planet that had the balls to dare and match what Dead or Alive could accomplish with their chaotic cleavage, hereon referred to by the industry as jiggle physics. Through the decades, however, you can clearly see that the two franchises committed to implementing their titty tech in different ways and for different reasons. Dead or Alive 2 clearly had the superior-looking breasts. This was due in part to 80% of Koei Tecmo's development budget for 3 years being allocated exclusively to carving these chesticles, which, looking at it now, this was definitely the breast idea, as nothing else from this era could match the glory of the DOA 2 titties. Soul Calibur took a different route, however. While boobage of course was important, Namco also felt that making a fun fighting game should be an integral focus of their game development for some reason, which resulted in a pretty fun series of fighting games. They also, unlike Koei Tecmo, chose to also include jiggle physics on a male character for some reason. No idea why, but it's part of history, so here you go. Things began to really pop off from there. Namco took what they learned from Soul Calibur and continued to perfect their craft in Soul Calibur 2, except now they finally got to the point they needed to make doing laundry that much more awkward for my mom. The video game boobies finally looked as good, if not better, than one's IRL, meaning I finally had a good excuse to tell my dad about why I didn't care about going on dates, albeit in this gen we started to lose a bit of the jiggle that became the staple of previous entries. Instead of just simply refining what they already did with DOA 2, Koei Tecmo shit out DOA 3 pretty quick, but more importantly, they put all their focus in an entirely new and superior subgenre of the franchise, with the first Dead or Alive Extreme, a game where the devs finally said, screw it, let's give the fans what they really want out of DOA. No men, no fighting, just women, bikinis, and jiggles. But since you technically have to have a game for people to play on the disc, otherwise it'd just be a really strange DVD, the devs threw together a quick volleyball mechanic to appease regulators. It was a technical marvel at the time. The game featured the best use of shadows of any game of the era. Ambient occlusion is present. And while there was no ray tracing support, motion blur and chromatic aberrations are words in a dictionary. It was truly a marvelous time to be alive. And I, as well as many other gamers, will cherish those memories forever. The 7th gen continued to bring refinement, with much in the way of returning to the jiggles of yore. As seen here in Soul Calibur 4, the tig ol' biddies are as tig as ever, if not tigger. And finally, we begin to see some return to form in terms of true jiggles. But this was only the beginning of what the 7th gen had in store for the world's best chests. Fans around the world were blown away by the great work done in Dead or Alive 4, but also, if not more so, on Dead or Alive 5, where devs painstakingly worked to add booby features that were simply unheard of. More on that later in the video. Unfortunately, all the goodwill done with Dead or Alive 5 was washed away by the tragedy of Dead or Alive 6, a game where, for some reason, the devs spent more time making a decent fighting game than anything else, going as far as decreasing the amount of jiggle present in the fighters, as if that's not the most important part of the game. At first glance, it may seem as if the jiggle was even better in DOA 6, not worse, but an in-depth technical analysis at the end of the video will explain why this is a categorically inaccurate assessment. Some characters even completely lacked any kind of skimpy outfits, like Jesus Christ. Was this game developed by Ruth Bader Ginsburg? I checked and it wasn't. Maybe Koei Tecmo finally started to fear the impending doom of the Me Too movement. Either way, this game ended up mid as hell because of it. Namco also betrayed its fan base with the release of Soul Calibur 6, featuring the first instance in the series' history where jiggles were reduced in a new entry, making Soul Calibur 6 undoubtedly the worst entry and being considered by many as the reason why the franchise died. It's nothing short of devastating to see what has become of such storied franchises after all these years, especially considering how much effort was put into not just the console releases, but the ports for mobile devices as well. Soul Calibur Broken Destiny for PSP featured jiggling that blows that of Soul Calibur 6 totally out of the water. Just watch as Ivy takes out this Harley Quinn looking thought with ease as her chesticles breeze through the wind. This was on a PSP, folks. Similarly to their console versions, however, Soul Calibur could not compete with Dead or Alive Jiggle on a handheld. This PSP port of Dead or Alive Extreme also featured some jiggling that would make Bill Cosby blush. And I think there was a game in here somewhere too, but I don't remember. Oh, there it is. Yeah, more volleyball stuff. Neat. With that being said, before we conclude this video with our Digital Foundry Most Titillating Title Award, let's go over some honorable mentions of video game booby history. Obviously there's this. I didn't want to hear a bunch of comments about this not being here, so here... Conker's Bad Fur Day on the N64 delighted everyone with its portrayal of this weird sunflower lady with giant boobies. After completing her questline, you're forced to watch Conker observe a king bee interact with the nice lady's chest. And like that Cardi B song, the sunflower seems glad that he came. After the king bee is done with his business, the crazy sunflower lady allows you to use her chest to reach new heights, marking the first time in the history of, I think, existence. Someone can jump on a pair of tits and go higher than they would have had they not jumped. Street Fighter V featured breast enlargements for Chun-Li, however the game made headlines with a glitch present in the character selection screen. Devs said this was a mistake, but the eagle-eyed among us, I'm sure, always assumed this was a feature meant to be in the final release that was more than likely axed at the last minute by some Karen on the executive board. And finally, quite possibly the most infamous game on the list, Ninja Gaiden Sigma 2, a reimagining of Ninja Gaiden 2 for the PS3 that featured not only jiggles, but finally for the first time in history, the ability to control the movement of the jiggles with your 6-axis PS3 controller. This was a momentous occasion and a huge point of gaming history, as this marked the first and quite possibly only time that most PS3 users would ever be able to move a woman's breasts with their hands. But what takes the crown of Digital Foundry's most titillating title? Well, that's none other than Dead or Alive 5, Ultimate Edition for the PS3. While at first it may seem as if the jiggles aren't comparable to DOA 6, a quick delve into the settings immediately opens up a world of possibilities. Unlike other entries in the series, Dead or Alive 5 gave you the option to choose between 4 different and unique type of jiggle physics. The worst one, which is off.
Come and fight.
Get ready, fight!
The standard game setting, which is natural.
Come and fight.
Get ready, fight!
The DOA setting, the setting closest to the other games like 6.
Get ready, fight!
And finally, the best setting of the entire franchise, OMG.
Regret this.
Get ready, fight!
Let me just keep this going a bit for science. It was as if we truly came full circle. Finally, video game boob that looked realistic while also seemingly maintaining the density required so as to have each individual tit appear to have its own center of gravity. But what made the PS3 Ultimate Edition the best one? It comes with the original update 1.03 on the disc, meaning you can actually control the shake of the boobies with the 6-axis controller like in Sigma 2, which for preservation's sake truly makes this the ultimate version of Dead or Alive, and quite possibly the most important video game ever made. Happy Boobies No Die Month.
This was my favorite episode.
Weird you made me watch it with you, though.